long, and the recording will be available anytime you'd like. So that will be lovely. I'm really excited about this talk today because I love some forward thinking. It's really fun to take a look at what's going on in education and synthesize it and share what could be helpful for the parents in our community and who we serve. And so this talk is really for parents of school-age children. And it is really for parents who want to see the bird's eye view of what's going on and really learn a little bit more about what they can be thinking about. So, to get us started on this, I just want to also say I was talking with Julia, who I work with here at Evolve just before, about how it's really special that Evolved gets to zoom out and really see and appreciate all of the options that we have in education for our students and our families. And we really recognize that there's so many wonderful things happening in education, and we get to consume and learn about all of those amazing constructs and options. And we know for sure there's just not one way to do all of this. And what I hope you can really take away from today's talk, I'm just going to be very clear and upfront, is that a lot of education has stayed the same in terms of what we do on a daily basis with kids and these systems and so on and so forth. But there's a lot more in the landscape to consider. And that's both an upside and a downside. So you get to decide too, because what's an upside for you may not be the upside for somebody else, right? But that's what I want to provide some clarity for, right? Is that there's many different pathways now, and there's upsides and downsides to it. And I'm going to give you some ways to really consider this and make it simple for you so that you can navigate the way that all of this is changing for your child and your family. So before I get into the details, I always like to center us on some thinking. Think about your child. If you have children, think about each of them. Get them in your head. Really consider where they are right now. Maybe they're in school right this minute. And I want you to be thinking about your child as we're going through this content and really anchor what we're talking about around them. Okay? All right, so we're going to go to the first slide. And I'm going to be referencing a few notes. So just you'll see my eyes wander back and forth a little bit, but it's just because I'm giving you some good value here. I prepared. Okay, so today we're exploring this question, which is, are you ready for what's next? Mom, dad, caregiver of child, are you ready for what's next in education? And it's really clear that so much of our experience in education, no matter which system we're in, let's say we have a child in public school, private school, charter school, religious schools, homeschool, it really starts out as we all probably experienced, right? Your child's developing skills in the early years around academics, social, emotional, physical development, at home, at school. They're developing language, motor skills. They're maybe building, constructing, creating. They get into elementary school, and the depth and the breadth of these academic experiences become greater. And they start to really collaborate more deeply with the adults that they have in their lives. And the adults they have in their lives increase in number. You have now teachers and coaches and different related service providers, different parents, different, mentors, and so on and so forth. And as you get into high school, of course, the independence becomes greater. The expectations become greater for students. And they're delving into more academic work that involves learning material, demonstrating that they did learn the material, and making sure that they get all of their assignments in while also studying, writing papers, and doing all the things that they do to develop their social, emotional, and physical selves. So by the time now we're at the end of of high school, there's even more learning that's happening outside of the classroom. And I put this in because students in later years of high school are learning to drive. They're learning to fill out forms. They're learning to get jobs, right? The learning extends and they get to college and the learning becomes hopefully an ingrained part of their process. And so the linear experience of education is really still here. We still have early education, elementary, middle school, high school, college, right? But something is shifting, especially in 2026. And I took our logo and I sort of made this little diagram here to demonstrate. If you look at the one that has a little sketched out mark over here on the left, we maybe still have that linear pathway that's there. But there's so many different options. And I wrote this down because I really thought it was actually true. It's options. It's like off ramps, on ramps, pivots, accelerations, pauses, alternate routes. So many different pathways that you can take to get to the same endpoint. And it's really so interesting because you can look at this as an upside or a downside, depending, right? Depending also on the moment that you're in with your child. Remember, I told you in the very beginning, think about your child while you're hearing this content. So right now, if I said to you, guess what? There's four different ways to get to the end point of this learning. That might be really an upside for you. You might say, thank goodness there is, because we need a different one, right? Or you might say, gosh, I sort of wish there was less choice here. It would be kind of easier if we just had one pathway. So it really depends on the context of what you're going through, right? But no question, there are so many different pathways that we can take right now. And this is causing our families to be in a state where they're constantly evaluating and comparing, second guessing sometimes their choices, especially because we're raising human beings. And sometimes the path from one of these logos to the next isn't super easy, right? Or even the outcome might not be great. And then you sort of go and say, well, ugh, I wish I would have taken a different pathway, right? So it's really a lot and it's very real that this is really part of our educational journey, right? And so I asked the question, which you might be asking, and you might really know a lot of this, right? But why? Why are all of these pathways existing right now in education? How come we have so many different options? And of course, we know that one of the changes that's influencing us as a society is the technology. And for some students, this is not affecting them. Their programming is very typical, very, very unaffected by AI. But certainly everyone's sort of thinking about it, at least wondering about it. And the programming in schools couldn't be more different in terms of what they're doing. I was just talking with someone about how some schools use AI to teach English, writing, math skills, and they're using that in an app format. And that's the way the students are learning that content. And other schools are using AI as a bot, to ask students questions and get them to critically think and even redefine their research projects or give them a curiosity motivation to go and actually research something. So even within different programs, AI is being used differently, and it's really, really interesting. But certainly that's one of these things, that's really affecting all of these different pathways. Also, we are really demanding personalization. So, you go home and you flip on the TV and everybody used to watch the same thing on Thursday nights. Maybe you're old enough to remember that. Um, but ER was on and everybody talked about it, right? But it was just, it's not that way anymore. Netflix knows what you want to watch and will give it to you so you can spend your time doing the things that really matter to you. So it's really interesting, and this is affecting education pathways. There's also an increased awareness. And I really think this did start during the pandemic where parents became more aware of what was going on in school and more curious. And they sought out different pathways for their children during this time. And even as a residual effect, they are more inclined to ask questions about what's possible in education. We also have trust in data over trust in institutions. So parents are really seeking data to inform what is going on. They want to see how they are going to be, you know, like they want to know what are we making this decision about and why? And they're questioning that particular set of data, right? So this is causing people to make left turns or right turns. There's also this increased supply in educational pathways, meaning you have even more offers, more college opportunities, more schools, more choice in the environment. So all of this is contributing to more and more and more of these pathways, which is this picture that I was showing you earlier. So let's dive deeper into some of these pathways and how you as a parent might know about them a little bit more in terms of a then and now construct, okay? So we're going to be talking about these different areas that we're noticing. So one of them is admissions. Rigor is the challenge and the depth and the quality of thinking that your child is experiencing in educational and academic programming. Personalization, skills, student wellness, and then access and equity. So screens are the things that you need to do to prove that you belong in a particular program. So this is for some of our public schools here in New York City have them. All of our private schools have them. Colleges have them. So in some part of your child's life, they're going to have to endeavor some kind of screen. These are now changing. And so there's many more options. And it depends on if you think this is an upside or a downside. But in the then category, right, we would look before 2026 at comprehension and learning, unit tests, placement tests, standardized test scores to qualify the readiness for a student for a program. Now we're looking at what's the capacity that this child has to do this program? What's their capability? Let's look at how they do things to see if they can make it here. Schools are adding in assessments that give them the chance to see a student in action. This is very interesting because now they're evaluating not the results or the outcome of the student's progress, but they're really evaluating how the student is engaging in the learning process. Very interesting, very different. They're looking at the learning style of the student. Is this student learning in the way that we teach? Can they have listening comprehension? Can they learn the material at a particular pace? Can they acquire the information in groups, or do they need to have a teacher to student line of communication, right? And they're emphasizing also how well can the student problem solve. A lot of the independent schools in the high school, very competitive schools here, are using problem-based math in high school. And so they're looking at how well the student can problem solve as part of their metrics. And they're also looking at a little bit more of the personality of the student. They want to see the student's personality come out in the process. They don't want a general, templated, typical storyline. They really want to see the student come out and they want to see what this student has in terms of this aptitude piece, right? So this is interesting. It's definitely changing and evolving. In terms of student wellness, we used to sort of look at things like physical education. It was separate from the academics. If you had a mental health issue, excuse me, it was maybe stigmatized or not really considered at all. There was more reactive support or focus on behavior, grades, that sort of thing. And now we definitely see a shift in a lot of our schools where we're seeing a focus on whole child. I will tell you that I started Evolved in 2014, and our mission at that point was to teach and support the whole child. Full stop. That was what we covered. And it was very new. It was not something mainstream. And I've noticed now, 2026, it's really mainstream. People know what you're talking about. Typically, parents know what you're talking about when you say whole child. They might define it a bit differently, but everybody kind of knows that there's more going on here than just academics. Parents have known that forever. As soon as you're a parent, you're paying attention to everything. And that's a little bit of what Deanne and I wrote a book early on in this company where we talked about how as soon as you become a parent, you start thinking about your child in a whole sense. You don't have the luxury of just looking at what they eat. You have to look at all of the different parts of them, right? And so it's not that unnatural that we get here, but this is what education now is all about. There's a preventative framework for wellness. We want to educate children how to manage stress before they have stress. We want to help them understand how to have the executive functioning that they need to perform what they need to do earlier on. There's more of that kind of discussion happening with families in schools. There's also more of an open dialogue about these kinds of wellness issues, and people are really talking about them. And there's a lot more relationship opportunities for students in schools than ever before. And wellness is essential. People do understand that to the learning process, but it is still uneven. Like we do have in this particular construct, we have a long way to go. I do tell families that in the admissions process, we often edit or change or be careful of how we're speaking about some areas that are challenging within the student wellness realm because people sometimes are still not ready to hear that people can ebb and flow out of some of these things at times. So it's still an evolving area. And I would say I have high hopes for us to evolve even greater than we already are in this area. Oops. This is really an interesting slide, I think. So, this is really about skills and how we are thinking about them in 2026. And I want to read these two quotes to you because I do think they're really interesting. It's worth hearing them and seeing them at the same time. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs 2025 report estimates that by 2030, 170 million new roles will be created and 92 million will be displaced globally, driven largely by AI and other technologies. Hmm. The same work suggests that if the global workforce were 100 people, 59 would need reskilling or upskilling by 2030, and nearly 40% of current skill sets will be outdated between 2025 and 2030. And PS, we're already on 2026. So when we think about a quote such as this, right? To me, there's a lot of optimism and upside because I feel that what's happening here is we're really seeing a potential for an entire group of people to learn, to change, to evolve what they're doing. And it makes education even more interesting because we now see that people really do need to learn for their whole lives because when they're adults, the shifts that may happen to our society in the future are really going to be fast, and people need to be able to learn fast as a result, right? But it also brings up a lot of questions for kids and families, right? It's like, well, should I be thinking about college admissions if I'm looking at a private school? Is that going to be a thing even? Are we going to be going to college? Are we going to, what are we going to be doing? What are we really planning for? And in no other time that I can think of, is there a real question around some of this? And so to the extent that our work, of course, is everyone's invited to the table. We can plan this however you all feel good about, right? And the options are endless, really. We have a school of thought of, learn AI, get those skills down, become literate, make it part of your acumen. Probably good advice. We also have people who are saying, you know what? Still go to college. It's important to learn. It's important to go and have those years of independence with other young people your age. Develop yourself, right? There's still another group of people who are saying, who knows what we're even doing? This is great. We can really focus on maybe having a renaissance and people can get back to doing art and drama and music and sports because AI will take care of some of the things we really, don't do best, right? So I think it's really a time where there's a lot more optionality. And also, it becomes even more crucial for us as parents to ensure that our children understand how they learn and are empowered to learn. No matter what's happening out there, you always have the opportunity to get up every day and figure something new out for yourself. And that's such a gift that your education can give you, right? So, new skills are here. Of course, AI and technology, right? Then used for research, typing skills. I don't know about you, but when I was in fourth grade, I remember lugging a typewriter to this summer class to learn how to type. And I'm very grateful for that that lesson because I use typing all the time right now. But that's what it was, right? And it was teacher driven, content driven instruction. AI was kind of combined to data centers. Maybe you're in AI, so you know more about this than I do in terms of where it was. But certainly now it's up front, center, accessible. We see kids really dialoguing with this very naturally. I was in the car with my children, and they were just so easily saying, just ask chat, go ask that chat, right? And so it's just part of their worlds. It's not ever going to not be. So, AI supports are here, as I already talked about earlier. Schools are using it very differently in their work. So, as a consumer of education, it's very helpful to go and figure out what it is that's going on and what's for you and what's not. But it is really exciting. There's a lot of accessibility too. I am a special educator by training, and I think something that's really nice to see as I see the young adults that I work with in college to help them with their executive functioning and their writing. These are all tasks that used to be so burdensome and just highly, highly, highly exhausting. And now they can get a really nice outline produced for them. They know where they're headed with their ideas. They can still contribute and give their ideas and synthesize and learn, but a lot of that relief is available to them. And they can have really dense content explained to them and given to them in a way that their language is it's accessible. So this is all really kind of, to me, a very nice upside for a lot of our population of learners. And what I wanted to kind of go to next, let me get into this last one here and then I'll get to the next. So, access and equity is very interesting too, because we have a lot of changes happening here. We have where in the past, and I'm talking about access into screened programs, I'm talking about access and how one gets access to different types of educational programming is changing. And then we might have had this goal of expanding that breadth and depth of accessibility. We wanted more people to come into education. So we made a lot of access points for that to happen. We wanted to really celebrate persistence and support and completion of these different types of placements for race and disability and first gen students. Access to more selective schools was like very clear. It's like you got to get this SAT score, you have to have these grades, and that's kind of the way you got into certain programs, right? And certain students kind of knew that's where they were going, and other students kind of said, yeah, that's not going to be me. I'm going to be over here, right? And so now it's almost like whoever can access, meaning if you can fill out those forms and get that paperwork going and get your financial aid in order or get your documents in order, get your application in order, you can access these programs. The priorities are shifting into getting people in who have the funds to spend on it, who have the particular geographical regions of interest. The school has different priorities and contexts of what they're looking for. And there's different types of support programs available. And there's this crazy hidden culture going on with access of very selective schools. And we see this all the way down to nursery programs going all the way up to college where you're not really sure, like, is it test optional? Is it not? Do you get the good test and then you put the good grades in? And then what's the thing about the essay? And do you need to have an interview? How do you prepare for the interview? And there's just a lot of hidden culture there, right? For each and every specific program that you're going into. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason always for these things. So it's kind of an interesting time. Um, so what I want to say about all of this that we're seeing is that the mandate's the same, right? We still have our children in education, right? We are a learning human being. We are growing, we are developing in these schools. And I started us off in the slides in the systems of education, right? We're in public, private, charter schools, whatever we're in. And then we go from nursery school through college, right? So the same mandate is there. We're all going to school, we're doing our thing, we're going to a job, but it's like the priorities in the different places are different. Some schools won't even have any AI. Some schools will. Some schools will have more reading in the school. Some schools will have less reading. Some schools will have sports. Other schools have no sports, right? It's just really different in terms of how we are seeing different programs do different things with our students. So this is a lot of text. It's probably the one slide I have with a lot of text, but I want to stay here and just let you absorb some of this. It's kind of interesting because I feel like what this means for us is that our responses have to change. So just to qualify how all of those then and nows kind of come and trickle down into education, I wrote up like getting in is harder into selective schools. There's more kids can write so many. I didn't get to put all of the things in all of those slides that you just saw, but a child can apply to upwards of 20, 30 schools. So you could have a child apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, whatever, and all of the other kids can also do that very easily. So that's why you're seeing so many different, selectivity numbers in these really selective schools. And so preparation for these screens is really important. And there are things you can do in terms of preparing. And something I like to do here at Evolved is make a really complicated process or endeavor in education simple by just putting some organization around it. So if we're looking at an admissions process, let's just look at what that application looks like and backwards plan from there, right? And you want to really plan ahead and you want to make sure that you're doing the things that you can do if that's what your goal is to get into a selective school. And it takes longer to get that runway going. Individual rigor is the norm. Like everybody is kind of trying to work up to that highest level of rigor that they can in education. And you want to find your way to be challenged or develop yourself, right? It's not just one way to find rigor. Some students will get to AP level. Some students will do the IB program. Other students will take a college class down the street because their high school program doesn't offer anything really all that rigorous, right? There's lots of different options to get to the level of rigor that you can. And AI and technology is part of school. So there's an optionality there to gain skills and literacy. We've kind of talked about that, but I do think gaining skills and literacy is really key. Screening goes beyond the grades, so we're really looking at a depth and breadth of skills. So we're looking at admissions processes that look at how the students doing their math. Are they actually understanding the concepts? This is really different than taking a standardized test. So we really have to develop this breadth and depth of skills, especially if we're going to take advantage of all that education has to offer in 2026. Student support becomes essential. We have to curate and form communication with the team. So if a student is working with a mental health professional, it's very helpful if that person's strategies and different ways that they're helping the student gets enmeshed within the home, gets enmeshed within the school. Having communication across people who are working with your child often becomes the parent job, right? You're talking with the coach, you're telling the coach what works, and you're kind of grabbing at what the coach does that works and telling the teacher. And then you're telling, oh, this teacher and this teacher and this teacher, guess what? This all is something you need to know and put it all together, right? Eventually, that will go to your child in order for them to learn as they become adults. But it's important to have that kind of communication, right? And there's this emergence of new systems among like these old ones, right? So it's kind of like they're still the the schedule of the day in the school. But maybe on top of that schedule, there's a little bit of flexibility because the programming becomes a little bit different within it, right? So there's still like this old layer of stability that we have that we're now laying some new stuff on top. And college is something that is changing, right? We might have some increased options. We really need to understand the learner and really help them understand themselves so that they can make some decisions for themselves later on. So, if you're a parent, and remember I asked you if you're a parent to be thinking about your child at the start of all of this. I said, have your child in mind or have your children in mind, each of them separately, and try to think about what this all means for them and how you want to take away something here. And what I was hoping you would kind of take away is that there's many different pathways and there's upsides and downsides to all of them. And what I have to offer next are hopefully a couple of key concepts that will help you to know how to act and be in your role as a parent, right? Given all of this change and optionality. So I love teaching this. Everybody who's works here probably is smiling because I think they love it as much as I do. But it's really true. And this is true in the old world of education and right now too. But parents are in every education system, you're the leader of your child's learning life until they are. So in the very early years, you're making all the decisions about their education and they're just going along for the ride. And then as they become older, they're going to be making their own decisions about their learning life. And their learning life, again, just to normalize, extends past college. We need to really normalize that, especially given what's next in education in 2026. We're going to have to be learners in our adult lives too. So it's really important that we all really get familiar with this I do, we do, you do concept because it's really a helpful teaching model, but it's also a really nice way of thinking about your trajectory as a parent in education work. So in the very beginning years, you're doing a lot of that decision making. You're learning about your child, you're learning about the options. Eventually, you're partnering with your child. Maybe that happens, upper elementary school, you start really kind of asking them more about which way they want to do something, which activities they want to do. Maybe it's even earlier. And then the you do is when you sort of hands it off and you are now facilitating the questioning that would hopefully help them to decide what's best for them and their education and how they're learning and how they're engaging. And then the next one is that your child is a one and only, and you are too. So this is what's so cool about education, I think. So I come from a family that's pretty rooted in medicine and science, and we would have a lot of discussions about experiments, and I would read a lot as I was growing up in research, and I loved to like see the conclusions and see what people could come up with, and it just felt so good to know that there was clarity and an endpoint, and someone had figured something out. And I feel like in education, it's a little bit of a letdown in that way, but only because whatever we find out is for a group of people that have something in common, but underneath all of that commonality, there's really individuality. And so our brains are so unique that we really can't, with authority, apply this construct to you and you and you, and then it will work for you, you and you. It may not work, and it may work at this timing, but not at this timing, right? So it's very complicated, actually. So we do know some things about education. We promise you we do, but they don't always apply in the same way for every single human being. And that's where parenting can be really cool because the next one, which I also really love, is that they're learning, but you're learning too, meaning you've never met your child before, neither have we. And as you go along in their lives, you get to see how they're going to continue to develop and grow and what they're going to continue to be enamored with versus not. And as they're going through that process, you're also going through a process, which is you're learning too. So it's really kind of a cool concept if you really do think about it. And it also releases you a little bit from some of what's also available, which is you, the parent, have to know everything and guide your child into everything that they're going to be doing. I mean, you don't because you've never met your child before. You're going through a collaborative, investigative process at all times to see what's working. And a lot of the work that we've done here and that I've written about and published, it does really go together. Like when I wrote about the power of questioning, the reason that that to me is so impactful is that it gives you a way to experiment on your kid. And I don't want to say that I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not saying like just throw something out there and try it out. You're making an educated guess based on data. So if we know a child has a hard time processing information, which if you don't know what that is, it's like how you actually and like the time it takes you to understand something, a new concept. And let's say you're really slow at that, then you're going to benefit from previewing material and you're going to benefit from working through material a couple of times because then you're going to be able to process it in the way your brain works best. So if we know that information, the experiment we can run is, hey, if we preview this material, we think we're going to have a better learning experience. Let's try that out, right? And so if it didn't work, then we would wonder if there was some way in which we're delivering the information that isn't helping. And then we would continue to ask, right? But I love that that is possible for us as parents, is that we can really try different ways of doing this work of education with our kids. And we can make a change if we feel we need to. And that's where we are in 2026. We get to make changes if it's not working, which is really great. And the other thing is to know is that you're not alone, but be mindful of who you're with. And I didn't learn this until a little bit later in my career. And I'll be honest that, sometimes when I look back before I knew this and then after I knew this, I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have known that sooner. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about in a second. But I was taught this by a dear friend, Beth Pilchuk, who I think is a really cool mom, and she did a lot for her kids, and I learned a lot from her. And she used to use this concept of a bench. It just made the most sense to me. But when she taught it to me, I couldn't undo it. And then it like really made me think about this concept of you're not alone, but be careful of who you're with. So this is a pretty helpful bench, right? Like wouldn't you love to have all these people on your bench with you while you're parenting your child, right? You'd love to have all these people weighing in. They know your child in different ways and you don't have their expertise, but they get to tell you what their ideas are and you get to kind of try on these new approaches and share them with each other or whatever. um, but oftentimes, and this was certainly me, this might be your bench. So I certainly was victim here where I just was unaware that there was even such a thing as a bench, but there is a bench and you're often sort of talking with a mom friend at dinner or a dad friend, and you're just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing right now? What's next in education? What should we be thinking about next? And then they tell you, and then you say, oh, that's what we should be doing. And in fact, what's an even better approach, and I'm sort of one that I just so you're clear, I don't judge and I'm not trying to shame anybody if this is your approach, but I'm just saying that a really nice offer is to think about your child. Remember, I told you that in the very beginning of the talk, right? Think about your child in all of this. And as long as that advice sticks with your child and really works for your child, then it's great advice to have on your bench. If it's really great for that family and it worked for that child, that's great. But it may not work for you. And I think where I ran into the issue early on was just I would say, oh, I need a playbook for a kid with ADHD because one of my kids was diagnosed with that. And I was like, what are people doing with this? And I just thought of it as that, like, I just need this. And then I would try on some things and I would realize it really doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for him. It doesn't, this isn't working, but it should be working because that's what you do for a kid with this profile, right? But I learned in Beth's conversation with me with this concept that really you have this other option, which is you can kick people off your bench whenever you want. You can even kick thoughts off your bench and say, this this was what worked for me when I was learning, but it's not working for my kid. So, oh, I read this, but I don't think that's going to work. I don't like that. It's not going to work in my house. Like I also remember there was a really great idea that came in from one of the teachers, and it just we just couldn't get it to work in our house. I had like three young kids at the time. I was starting this business. Like it just required too much of me to get in place. And so I wasn't able to execute on it. And I felt really badly about that at the time. But now, if I could teach myself something, I would say, not every solution, not every good solution is going to work for you at the time. And so you also have permission to sort of kick things off the bench if they're just not working for you, right? I just love this. It's really such a great concept. So if you're here today as a parent, then hopefully we've earned a spot on your bench. And I say that with a lot of pride and also responsibility. And I feel like, we are very honored to grow with our families. We have this lovely construct of having the opportunity to care for students from nursery all the way through college. And to me, there are all of these great pathways in education. There's so many different options, right? And there is a real change happening in education and what our kids are going to be doing for the end result of their education in their adult lives. And when we thought about 2026 coming in, we said, you know what? We need to kind of update what we're promising people that we're doing here to be a little clearer, but just also to articulate really what we are doing and what we have been doing, really. But hopefully this gets at it a little bit better. And so in the past, and we're still, of course, dedicated to this, which is we support students to learn well. Before that, as I mentioned, it was all about whole child and looking at the whole child. And we've evolved again into we understand how a student learns, we build the skills to succeed, and we make confident decisions so every student is fully prepared for what comes next. So, really, everything that we're doing, the services, the things that we're doing with families, what we're saying is we like promise that what we're going to do is we're going to help and evolve the understanding of the student. If we're doing that, then we're successful. And we promise we're going to do that. We promise we're going to look into who your child is with you. And we're going to help your child at a certain point understand themselves. Because I can tell you, I do this work as well with my own children. And the best thing ever is that I have a kid going off to college who like knows how he learns and he knows what he needs to get things done. And to me, that's amazing. I took a long time to get there. So I think that's really special. And we can leave every service with that, right? Every single service. And we can also build skills to succeed. We can make sure that anything lagging is getting bolstered. And we can do that in a lot of different ways. We can help parents with skills, we can help kids with skills, and we can teach, and that's great. And then we can help people make confident decisions amongst all of those pathways. Like, how do you know where to go? We are going to do that work with you and help you make those decisions for your child and really facilitate that bench and get everyone to weigh in. And it's not our way or the highway. It's really an investigative approach given all of this information that we're going to be studying. Let's see what works for you and let's see what the pathway can be. And we want to be ready for what's next. We're going to be studying all of these options as they're going along. So here, families can understand the student learning profiles, build skills to succeed, make confident decisions, and we work and we are dedicated to work in this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful picture here. And I know Becky's on, so she's probably smiling right now because we both are in love with this. But it's really about bringing school and home together around the child and taking care of what's in the middle there, the total educational process. And for different kids, it looks different. But learning and education doesn't just happen at school. It happens at home and it happens at school. And so really this is the work that we're doing, and we're trying to put things together so that the child has the opportunity to learn well. And we don't mean learn without obstacle or friction or angst or or failure, right? Like there's different things that go along with all of this. We just mean that we're really doing the work to make sure that the child is in the right place, the best place they can be given whatever that those options are, right? And we have this amazing team. This is not everybody on our team. These are the directors of different divisions that we have. But just to give you a sense of who we are, in case you're coming in case you just have worked with us in one way, but you're like, oh, okay, I didn't know there was more going on here. There is a lot going on here, but we're really intentional about it. And we have these amazing educators who are directors of various divisions that we find families need the most support with. So, these are the folks that you can go directly to if you want any of these kinds of supports, which is great. And we're dedicated to the range. So we want to be in this linear process. Remember, I started off just by saying what's not changing here, everybody. Don't worry, not everything's changing. Um, we're going from nursery school to college still. That's still here. But there's lots of different opportunities in terms of where you're going. So, and we're going to help you with any of these things. We can do, school placement, tutoring, learning plans, test preparation, special education, executive functioning in college. So it's like if you have a question, you're not even sure if we do what you need, you can always just call us and figure it out. So, really, we're here to help you get ready for what's next. There's a lot of really cool ways you can also just gain resources and knowledge. Hopefully, this talk was the start of a really nice learning journey for you where you just started to think about things just a little bit differently. That's what we like to do. We like to kind of say, hey, let's think about it this way over here. Let's maybe think about your child a little bit more holistically, or what would happen if we change this up? Maybe that would be better, that sort of thing. But these are different resources that we produce as a company. So come on in and listen into our podcast. We love our podcast. Amy and Becky and I just taped February's, which is going to be on test preparation. It's very, very good. And as a mom who's going to now go through a process of test preparation for two kids, I am really glad to know it is going to go well. And then, we have a lot of articles that we write and different events that we put on. And we're always happy to talk with your schools or organizations. We just did a really great talk with Nest Plus M community around executive functioning. So we're looking to be impactful and to help families in 2026 to really be ready for what's next. So if you feel like we could be helpful, just reach out. So I'm going to stop the presentation there, and I'm going to actually also stop the recording. Just, I think that's about right. And then if anyone does have questions that came up for you, I'll go check the chat and you can put them in there, or you can come off mute and you can ask me anything that you have on your mind related to this topic. Let me just go ahead and put this on a stop. Thank you. Thank you for coming.